arguing with how it's represented. It's also fun to see new regions of Riley's mental landscape, like the giant ravine that fuels her contemptuous side.
The sarcasm.
Actually, it's called the sarcasm. The story kicks into gear when Riley is sent to an elite 3-day hockey camp, where she's forced to make some tough decisions, like whether to stick with her two closest friends or hang out with the cool older kids. As the pressure on Riley mounts, and the competition gets more cutthroat, it's Anxiety who emerges as the movie's villain. Hawk does a great job of making the character's polite bundle of nerves routine a little more annoying and sinister in every scene. Anxiety basically engineers a hostile takeover of Riley's mind, banishing joy, sadness, fear, anger, and disgust to the outskirts of consciousness, and setting out to mold Riley into a more successful version of herself. What she's unwittingly doing is making Riley more ambitious and conniving. Inside Out 2, in other words, is something of an anti-stress movie, where unchecked drivenness can destroy a person's true sense of self. It's hard to argue with that, but it's also hard not to push back a little. This isn't the first Pixar movie that's tried to teach us to lighten up and let things go, a lesson that dates as far back as the first Toy Story. But it's always struck me as a bit rich coming from Pixar, given the hyper-ambition and perfectionism that have long defined the studio's brand. Fortunately, there is a better, deeper message at the heart of Inside Out 2 that encourages us to take a more expansive view of ourselves, to acknowledge that we all have the capacity for good and bad. As in the first movie, the goal is to strive for balance, embrace complexity, and learn to be okay with imperfection. I'm trying to do that myself with Inside Out 2, which, despite its many pleasures, is a pretty imperfect movie. It isn't nearly as emotionally overwhelming as its predecessor, but how could it be? The first Inside Out was a piercing lament for childhood's end,
It was terrible.
with joy and sadness' frenemy dynamic as its irresistible core.
You could resist it.
Now, Riley's older.
But I might check
and
out the new one
maturing,
if it's got a new director
and
and
it's
stuff.
natural that her latest adventure should hit us differently. But there are also some bewildering choices here that suggest the story could have used, well, a rethink. There's one overlong sequence in which Joy and her friends encounter memories of old cartoon and video game characters buried deep in Riley's mind. It's a cheap gag, and it almost pulled me out of the movie entirely. And there's a recurring joke involving Riley's sense of nostalgia that strikes a weirdly sour note. Ironically, it made me feel a little nostalgic myself, for the days when Pixar would have known to leave a bit like that on the cutting room floor.
Justin